we predicted. I think this is going to be a close fight.
Yeah, I mean, just starting with a draw really reminds us how equal this match is. They played a game, it's still equal, and I think it's living up to that expectation so far. As for this opening, Tanya, Rook B1 is kind of a way to stop Bishop B4. Black often wants to take on D4, trade pieces with a Bishop B4 check, but Rook B1 says, I want to keep the fight alive, keep more pieces on the board, and look at this unconventional way of playing chess, right? H-pawn up the board, modern computers.
I love it. And the H-pawn doesn't only aim to get to H6, which has been stopped, but the idea of activating your rook without the need to actually castle to bring it to the game. So we have a rook left here, the rook attempting to line up against the black king with threats on that H6 pawn. This is definitely part of the plan, part of prep that Denis has with the white pieces in this match against Arjun.
Yeah, King H8 played in prophylaxis, right? Preempting the idea of Rook G3, which we can only expect. But King H8 on its own, white doesn't have to commit Rook G3. So I was going to say we might see the bishop move out and then Queen D2 with an idea of bishop takes H6 just to continue the attacking ideas. But instead, first starting with bishop D3 aimed at the king side.
And I think that was a sneaky threat, right? Once the king has sidestepped, Arjun's also setting up the idea of E5, striking in the center, hitting that rook on H3. So perhaps that's also something that discouraged the plan of lining up the bishop with the queen. And I wonder if Arjun can still go for the plan with E5.
Yeah, it looks honestly like a tricky idea just on its own. And it's making me think, it's on the board. First of all, it's making me think maybe, was that just completely missed or underestimated at the very least?
You know, I would have been very inclined to believe it, but the speed with which Rook G3 came on the board, it almost felt like somewhere Denis, perhaps after playing Bishop D3 or maybe part of prep, but it looks like Arjun did manage to free up his pieces with that move, with the pawn moving forward.
Yeah, this is very clever actually, and achieving E5 is a really big deal. It means that the bishop on C8 is participating in the game. There's queen to H1 as well, which does mean that you either have to bring your bishop back or allow a queen trade. And when you're on the attack, you don't want to trade queens.
No, you don't. I'm actually really liking Black's position here. You solved the problem of the light squared bishop. You pointed out the ideas of the checking, and there we've got, well, the first question mark appear, which is a very natural move. And usually when that happens, one does get the feeling that things haven't gone as per plan for white here. Bishop E3, a mistake.
Yeah, and the move really doesn't look that bad, but obviously bishop e3 not liked by the computer here, and I'm still trying to figure out why. Takes on d4 followed by knight to c6, and we can immediately see the engine's arrow. That's not from me, Tanya. That's bishop h6 being pointed out without the queen backing it up.
That is incredible stuff. And it is the only move. It is the best move in the position. I'm not sure if the second move gives a huge advantage. The second best move gives a huge advantage or is better for black. But usually when the blue arrow appears, it means that white must find this idea. Bishop takes pawn, not the most obvious. I'm guessing the idea is next to bring the queen to attack that pawn on h6 once the bishop is captured.
Yeah, and I'm really wondering what's going to occur afterwards, because let's say you take on h6, black is going to recapture. And, at this point, I'm wondering if the players are calculating exactly that. I can just put it on the board here while we take a look, waiting for a move to happen. Takes queen to d2, attacking this pawn. If you bring the king up, right, you're kind of walking into this discovered check, which can only be bad. So it's making me think here, queen can come back to f6, but Tanya, this is going to get extremely messy. E5 is in the position, maybe some crazy move like bishop g6 in order to take the h-pawn. This is wild and definitely what the players are sitting there calculating.
100%, because you don't take this much amount of time on this move if you're not thinking about bishop takes pawn. I'll also quickly point out that after bishop takes pawn, queen h1 check. White is not intending to move up the king because then you trade win material and you're super happy. But Denis has bishop to f1, and suddenly that queen on h1 misplaced, and white's attack will be even stronger.
Yeah, and we're talking about this crazy move because the engine has brought it to our attention. However, there's also a skirmish going on in the middle of the board. Pawn takes on c5 is a perfectly normal move. it looks like it might even just win a pawn, and you take back with the bishop, hitting the rook. Not to mention d5 is also very nice. We have a great central pawn mass. So really, so many tempting moves in this position, Tanya.
And that's exactly what we just saw on Denis. With a shake of his head, it's so difficult to calculate and navigate through these complications. And he doesn't go for either of these two options. And this is what usually happens, right? You're tempted to make it, but you can't find the path forward. And you end up making a mistake. Bishop b5, allowing black to trade that bishop on e3. Knight takes pawn. And I think Arjun finds this. Knight takes pawn, get rid of that dark squared bishop as quickly as you can.
Yeah, and it looks like a very, very obvious move. So there's nothing special about knight takes d4. Denis has also done this intentionally. He's trying to encourage it. He's looking to recapture on d4 twice, and then he'll be threatening checkmate in one on g7. So it's always interesting when both players maybe go down a variation, but Denis is the one actually encouraging it, and yet it's supposed to favor Arjun.
And there are so many tactics on the board, right? Knight takes pawn, bishop takes knight. Black can't throw in queen takes pawn, a check in the center, because that gives white's bishop the time to actually retreat, blocking that check. And I just wonder if those extra minutes that Denis took him on to make the move bishop b5, is that going to come to haunt him? Because big questions ahead. Whoa.
Yeah, and queen takes e4. Maybe not the most accurate move, but certainly a great move. Taking a center pawn makes a lot of sense. Guarding the knight. There was something he didn't like about knight d4, and honestly, it was what Denis was preparing. Just centralizing the queen, hitting the g7 pawn. He did not want to allow it. Instead, I think Arjun feels safer pinning the bishop so that it just can't cause all the devastation that we've been calculating.
Insane stuff. And now he throws an intermezzo, an in-between move, instead of capturing on c5 immediately, which would have allowed white's queen to jump onto d6 with all kinds of attacks across the board. He first pushes the queen away. And now once again, Arjun cannot recapture or should not recapture, but go on the offense with knight d4.
Yeah, I wonder, after knight d4, king to f1, whether something like that was potentially missed. I think black had knight f5 in that position, but instead, Arjun goes a different direction. Bishop f5. Easy to understand what the threat is. The rook on b1 is hanging. That would also trade queens. So I don't think there's any time for this aggressive bishop takes h6 move, trying to set it up with king f1. You have to react here, Tanya.
It's already a very fascinating battle. And Denis here, he slows down. He doesn't have time to unpin that bishop, as you're pointing out. Black is also setting up rook c8, lining up against the white queen on c1.
Yep. Yeah, if we're looking at this position, it really feels as though unless there's a breakthrough sacrifice, I'm starting to just, optically enjoy the way that Arjun has set things up. He's got the queen centralized. The rooks are coming into the middle, two beautiful open lines. And I tell you, Tanya, the move knight d4 at all times looks really troublesome.
Especially because it comes with a tempo, and it is on the board. He hits that bishop on b5. Rook c8 still in the air. f3. And this is what Denis has to do now. He has to go all in with the chips that he has, right? You can't play slow in such a position. Attacks the queen.
I mean, yeah, knight to c2 is available. I guess there's also a kind of a crazy looking queen to h4 move to hit the rook, pin the rook, and I wonder what happens after that.
I think the idea is to go king f2 perhaps after queen h4, because you really want to be threatening bishop takes pawn on h6. You don't want to bring your bishop back. There's queen h1 ideas which look devastating as well. So he's perhaps counting on the king, and he does it.
Yeah, it's all on the board right now. Bishop takes h6. We've sort of been eyeballing that from white's perspective the entire game. The time, Tanya, is starting to tick down as maybe queen f6, the engine saying, find this move because it's the main way that you can stop bishop takes h6. King f2, I think, caught him off guard.
And Arjun doesn't find it. He plays another move that looks strong enough to defend, because you're stopping that check on the h line and hoping for a rook g8 if needed after a sacrifice. But it looks like Denis is on the offense. He's using the other side of the board now, pinning that knight.
Yep, and watch out for knight f5. It's a really nice move that hits everything in the position. I bet that this is the plan on the next move.
And even though the eval bar says that the game is absolutely level, Aman, I think a draw is the least likely outcome right now.
Yeah, exactly. Equal with best play, but I tell you, we're already seeing a question mark move given. Pawn takes on c5 is what the engine is looking for, but how can you not play knight c2?
You must, and that's exactly what he's done with 15 seconds on the clock. The most natural move, hitting the rook, hitting the bishop. Is it ideas of rook f4, attacking the black queen? You need to constantly be on the offense here. Oof.
Yeah, at this point,
It's
queen e7 being given a blunder because of rook to e4, disconnecting the bishop from the knight on c2.
And Denis finds it. He finds it with 11 seconds remaining on the clock. He gets the brilliancy in, and he's winning big material right now. But wait a second, Arjun's got his own tricks. f5, forking the two rooks.
Oh my goodness. And I wonder, are we going to see this bishop e5 idea? Yes, rook g8, there's bishop c4, but it's not clear that this is winning.
But this looks so incredibly powerful. The bishop pair doing that job. That rook on g8 stuck to defend the g7 pawn, now picked up. And though black has an extra pawn, but that's not for long.
That's right. The king can slide up to h7. The bishop is trying to watch the f5 square because you really don't want that pawn to shoot up the board.
And the only piece that Arjun can play with is the bishop. Everything else is tied down, but maybe that's just about enough to hold the endgame.
Will the king go forward? King f5 is always the decision. You drop the h-pawn, though, and that frees black's pieces. So he's not willing to commit that just yet.
And the rook doing a bit of yo-yo, defending the g7 pawn and the a4 pawn when needed. Shuffling with the king. Arjun cannot allow the g-pawn to fall. The bishop will come to b3, defend that a4 pawn.
If the bishop went to b3, there was f5. That was a really clever maneuver.
That was incredible. And that's why he couldn't play bishop b3. He does win.
I can't tell if he just got baited there. Taking h6 almost seemed to help Arjun free all of his pieces. But honestly, I don't even know if this is winning here. Bishop to d5 covering the square, but dropping the pawn with check.
Whoa, and just 3 seconds on the clock. That a-pawn, that's a monster. It's about to queen any moment. Now you've got two pieces that need to stay defended. The white king is going to advance forward. The f-pawn will start moving ahead. I think black's just going to be overloaded in this position.
Yeah, there's no way you can stop both pawns. The a7 pawn is permanently defended. I think it's time to just play f5.
And you can take forever to make that move. It's so hard to play this position with black when you're on the defense. White getting an extra second every time. But he has to find that right moment to push that f-pawn.
Yeah, he does. Also, there's, rook f7 can help out. And what you don't want to do, though, is you don't want to just win the bishop for both pawns, because that would get to a rook versus rook and bishop, a drawn endgame.
God, this is so much of the mouse skills as much as it is speed, skill, and accuracy. Right now, the f-pawn has finally found its way to the other side of the board, and that's definite progress for Denis. And he does it. He wins a piece. He's about to win the game. Now
he wins the bishop. That's all you need. But look, this coordination is a little bit strange right now. I don't know that he saw that, Tanya. I don't know that he saw